Welcome to the SRMC Tribe Podcast. Normally give a bit of an introduction at the beginning of these, obviously tell the audience who the guest is, but for reasons that will become obvious, we're going to keep your name out of today, if we don't make any sort of slip-ups. I fancied Bill Kilman, but I know he wasn't too keen.
I don't think we even know your real name.
Yeah, if who knows what he's called, but obviously this is I suppose the first time we've done anything like this, and probably out of every one we've done so far, this one I've been looking forward to the most. Kind of always been captivated by I suppose my sort of favourite films are Point Break, Departed, Serpico, all with sort of undercover cop stories.
ID. We talked about that last night.
Yeah, it's for whatever reason why that sort of.
Hopefully, I can shatter all those illusions for you.
Please don't.
In one go.
Departed. I'd say that's probably my favourite film, which people probably think we got one of the actors from Departed, but obviously, a career in law enforcement with a pretty extensive career in undercover as undercover cop, which most people, apart from TV shows and films, are going to have no understanding of how that world works, what type of person you have to be to even be selected to do it and have the skills to do it, to do it well. And just looking forward to hearing your story, mate. But we normally start from right at the beginning, from the rags to riches story, hopefully. If you want us to start us off, mate.
Well, firstly, thanks for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you two, particularly. I haven't done podcasts. I don't do them for obvious reasons, but this was a little bit of a different setup, and I just thought it was worth coming and having a chat with you two because no, not at all. Background wise, I grew up in London. I was very lucky I feel lucky in the way that I was brought up by my parents, both very loving. I got a couple of siblings, brother and sister, and I've got really good memories of my childhood. I'm not going to say I got dragged up or any of that business. It wasn't like that at all. To the point where my dad was a trader in the city, and I think he knew he was going to do well, but he wasn't right. He wasn't at that stage quite yet, and he borrowed money from my granddad to put myself and my brother through private school. So I was really lucky, really blessed with the childhood that I had. Went through that, didn't do very well, to be fair. Probably should have been in a different school, but I didn't do very well. But that wasn't the point. They did everything, they prepared everything, they set it out exactly how they wanted to, and I'll always be grateful for that. When I left school, I got to this stage, I was like 16, 17, didn't get the qualifications I needed to carry on in sixth form, and I was looking really to go out to work. My brother had gone on to do a degree and then went and followed my dad's footsteps in the city, and I was looking at, that's not for me, I can't do that. So I was trying to find something worthwhile that I actually thought I'd benefit from, and long story short, I ended up with, I didn't want to sit behind a desk, so I wanted something, and I went for the police, and then at 18 I joined the police.
Which year was that?
89.
Young, isn't it, that, to join the police?
Yeah,
I
didn't know. Yeah, and when you look back on it, you're like a kid who's been dressed up in a uniform to pop round someone's house,
after fancy dress.
Yeah, it's like fancy dress because you go around there. I mean, how can I walk into someone's house and start telling them about their domestic issues with their husband or wife when I don't know anything, But it was, but that's what it was, and
that's obviously the Met you joined.
No, it was another force outside of London, but. It was, it was an interesting time. I have to say, I loved it. It was like I went on to do 30 years in different capacities, which we'll go on to talk about. But
you kind of said, but what was the reason you thought, it was a TV or like the Bill or something? Why do you go, I want to be
the Bill? Yeah, I was an avid fan.
Everyone was.
Yeah, no, I think for me it was going to be the military or the police. Or the fire brigade. The fire brigade would have made sense in that other family members before me had a career in that, and I kind of looked at all of them. But I was that sort of young and impatient that the first ones that responded to me were the ones that I was going with. You know, not really. I remember even thinking about the RAF, but then I remembered you had to sign up for 6 years, and I thought, I'm not signing up for 6 years. That's ridiculous, because I might want to go on and do something else. So I went and did 30 with the police. You know, so it's like...
You enjoyed it from day one, right?
Yeah, I had a right laugh. I mean, it was... I left, I went into single quarters. I had mates that I lived with. It was the first time that I was sort of going out. I was earning next to nothing, but didn't care. And yeah, I had a great time. And I sort of... I know we'll go on to talk about it, but I sort of think with the police that I kind of consider it like a kid that gets taken to a theme park, and you go... I know it's not like that now, by the way, but I went in and I'd look and see, I'd go on as many rides as I could. And that's what I was like with squads or departments or specialisms. You'd look at it and go like, that looks really cool. I'm going to spend the next 3 or 4 years getting there. And then...
So you moved around quite a few different roles in that before you went in the undercover stuff?
I did. Well, yeah, I did. I mean, my first 4 or 5 years, I was on what would be called response. So you do your probation for a couple of years. You're brand new. You don't know anything. You're being looked after. Then you kind of like carry on in that role and just get a bit better and a bit more experienced. So that was just, I was in a response car. So you just turn up at emergency calls all over the place. And that was as a young bloke, that was just great fun as well.
Every single day is different.
Yeah, I haven't got a clue what you're turning up at. You don't know what's going to happen, you know. And it was just that there was that level of heightened awareness that was just good fun. I mean, it's a little bit. You speak to people now, and they're getting dragged around. You know, and it's a real negative thing. It wasn't for me. When I look back on it in my time, it wasn't like that. But I did that for 4 or 5 years. Then I went on to what was called like a divisional team, which was plain clothes, looking after people or looking for people that were selling drugs and bits and pieces like that. And then my next point where I looked and thought, that's where I think I need to be was on a firearms team. I walked through a corridor, seen a load of guys in the end of the corridor with sort of just dripping in kit and guns, and I thought that looks like a lot of fun. But I didn't realise how difficult it would be to get on there. But that was me. That was like that day.
What I say is you have to show some aptitude for the right sort of character, I guess, for them to take you on in that role.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, and we're sort of talking about around 95 now. And at that point as well, they were like, it existed in a time where if they didn't like you or they didn't know you, you weren't going on there anyway. So it was very much, you know, if the cap fitted as far as they were concerned. So I just went about my business, being busy and getting on with doing what I was doing, and showed an interest. And anyway, I ended up on there on my second attempt, annual second attempt to get interviewed and get on there. And then I spent and it was a fixed term of 4 years.
Any interesting jobs that you can talk about?
On there it was just great fun. You dealt with who were arguably the most violent people that you were likely to come across. That was the reason you were called to do it. We spent some of our time on the ARVs, because at that time it was a combined thing. So you'd do like a week of ARVs and then a week on a tactical team. But it was the tactical team that did both. Now they have an ARV department. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of good fun on that. And then when I finished that 4 years, I then became an instructor in firearms for 4 years. And that ended up, that was good as well. But it was kind of, I was going down a kind of like, I didn't know where I was going to go from there. I needed to find something else. But the 4 years was good. I got myself a job at the end of that, which is probably when you were saying about things that happened. It was in that period at the end of that I'd been given a task, like my governor had walked through in the army that we worked in, and he said, "We've got guys. It's a team called a Crops team, which is like covert rural observation posts. They're the guys that sort of get stuck into difficult surveillance positions that a conventional surveillance team can't do. It came from the military, and there was a lot of training that went on with that.
There's a bit of cross training in it.
Yeah, there was a lot of cross training certainly back then as well. And he asked me to arm them all, to train them to carry firearms. So I was like, well, I could do that, but I don't know what their job is. I don't know what their day to day involves. So how can I really train them? Certainly in tactics, can't do that. And so they then said, well, it'll be a good idea for you to go and do that job, to go and do the course, learn it, and then you can teach them, which I did. I had to go and do a surveillance course, then I go and do that course.
Good way of blagging a course there.
Pardon?
Good way of blagging a course.
Yeah, thanks for that. You know, by that time, I'd learned the way
how
to
it works.
how it works. Yeah. So then the end of that is pretty much you've just explained it, because of course, having come back and then having that qualification and then training them, they said, well, why don't you just come over to us so that we've got our own trainer embedded. And that's where I ended up.
Oh, you're like, oh, I never thought this could happen.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. I couldn't believe it, but it did. And so that was quite a good time. A funny sort of like situation where that was right at the end. One of the last messages I got in the last sort of month, I was a firearms instructor, was just keep your head down now, because you're going to move across to there. Don't get involved in any incidents where you're going to get in trouble. And I kind of, I was all right with that. And then sat in the armory one day and the phone goes, and it's a bordering force, a neighbouring force to ours. And they were like, have you got a less lethal capability there? Oh, yeah, what do you want? I said, well, like a taser. You got a taser? I said, yeah, we've got a taser. So we've got an armed siege down here, and we haven't got a less lethal capability, but we need one. And it's been going on for hours. So I said, yeah, we can send you one. But our policy at the time was we sent a less lethal option with a minder, and that minder had 9mm capability. So a lethal would travel with a less lethal, if for want a better term.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So they were like, yeah, just bring whatever you need to bring, but we need it here as soon as we can. So I grabbed one of the guys out of the office that was taser trained, and we shot down to this location where this siege was going on. And I kind of thought it would be like one where it was a rural force, and I thought it's just going to be something or nothing. In that there won't be many people that turned up. It was like Sky, BBC, all these vans. It was all taped off. You know, it was one of them. We arrived. They lifted the tape. We explained who we were. We came in. We got to the back of the car, get kitted up. I've grabbed the weapons that we need, and likewise, Keith, the guy I was with, grabbed his taser. And one of the blokes has got us and taken us around to the front to show us where this is going on. I said, well, we've got to get within 21 feet with this taser for it to work, so you need to get us somewhere close to it. And we were on the 18th hour of the siege, and he'd been firing out the window at people and this, that, and the other. It started with 2 hostages, which apparently weren't in there anymore or had escaped at different times. Anyway, he takes us round to the front, and as we're walking closer to it, he comes back to the window with a gun. And there's a big hole in it, and he's shouting out at one of the policemen and this and that. So we've got on the ground, and we're sort of crawling up to this cover of this car, and there's one of the local lads there with a weapon. And I'm speaking to him and said, like, why are you ducked down behind the car? Why are you not like engaging him? What's going on? He said, oh, we've just got used to doing that now. We're just getting behind the car when he's. So, well, that's not. And I looked behind me, and there was a woman leaning out of a flat that hadn't been taken away. So I saying, that's not the way to deal with this. This is not right. So he came back to the window, carried on again, had the gun in his hand, and so I fired 2 rounds from MP5, and they went through the glass of the kitchen, and he just disappeared. I was like, right, that's it then, done. It was just complete silence.
Keep your head down for the last month?
Yeah, nightmare. Yeah, and it was. I kind of like it was raining, and I remember the bloke turning around, the local guy turned around, he went, oh my God, how loud was that? I was like, well, yeah, but that's, and it was a really strange moment, really silent, and then it went mad on the radio. And they're like, shots fired, who's fired? And this, that, and the other. So I said to,
you just took it off your own.
Yeah, well, it was a threat. He was aiming the weapon at us, at another officer. I thought he's going to fire, he's going to hit someone, he's going to kill him. So it was a genuine fear for someone else's his life or ours. And I thought it just seemed like the completely right thing to do. I mean, I had a choice of, I could have fired through, there was an open part of the window where you could see his face. But that's not how the police work. You know, you shoot to stop. So I aimed for his torso, knowing I'd hit the glass and not knowing. As it happened, both rounds, the first round went into his shirt and come out the back. The other round went up at an angle and into a kitchen unit. So he's laying on the floor. I basically scared him. And I didn't know that. I thought I could hear him screaming, so I thought he's probably dying. But it actually turned out that he was absolutely fine. and I I probably could have got done for criminal damage maybe, and that was it. Like it was one of those. But they took the police took an hour and a half to get in there to give him medical treatment. It's all changed now. It's different now. People will go. We're a lot more dynamic in the way that we deal with things, or the police are. But yeah, that was a weird old time. So I thought, oh no, that's it. I'm done. I'm not moving on from here.
I'll tell you, they like a massive investigation.
Yeah,
as soon as you fire any rounds.
Yeah, there was an investigation into it. I was immediately suspended, but that lasted 24 hours. So it was like one of them. It started off. I had a brief that turned up on the scene, Federation that turned up. I was put in a suit. All my stuff was seized and all this business.
It's mad though when that's your job. Like.
Yeah,
it's like the other way around. There's like assumption of guilt.
Yeah.
And
how many times have we seen that? Right. Yeah.
This is why a lot of them step down, right?
Yeah, too right.
Because they're like, well, you're asking us to be the armed.
Yeah.
To escalate if needed, and we do it, and then you take the weapons off us, stand you down. It's just
and we say, and then the naming again. The naming of officers that are doing their job, which you've seen in the last few years. So that was. But anyway, got through that, and I moved, and then I moved on to that unit, and I did that full time for a few years, for 3 years I think it was, and it was during that period that I got approached by somebody that was undercover full time. That was his job, and he was a friend of mine. I'd worked with him many years before, but I hadn't seen him since he sort of left and started doing that work. And he came to me. He was higher ranking at that point, and he said, "Look, I think you should consider this as a job. I think you'd be right at it." And it wasn't a path that I'd really considered at all. But I sort of trusted him at the same time, and I was like,
so did you know about? Obviously, this undercover, but there's like at that time, it's like a specialist unit, and there's a big training. Did you know that? Is that known in the police?
No, I didn't know. I knew that I knew it existed.
Yeah.
I knew that there were different levels of undercover work, because I had friends that were what was called at the time, it was like level 2 or undercover foundation that were doing. They would buy like heroin and crack and stuff like that, but they had a day job, and they would take like test purchases. They had a day job, but they would go off a week or so at a time. And be deployed somewhere and then come back. I knew that existed. And then beyond that, it was all a bit of myth, really. And I suppose quite rightly so.
I suppose you don't come across that unit very often then, because they are all just working in little silos.
But you wouldn't know they were.
No, and you sort of, but also you kind of, you see the results of the work. Like for example, we raided, when I was on the firearms team, we raided a pub, and when we got a briefing, it was because there was a guy that had been in the pub for 9 months that was one of ours, and he was undercover, but he was going to get arrested, same as everyone else, and we didn't necessarily know who he was, but they just gave us that heads up, So there were little crossovers where I knew it existed, but I didn't know anyone that was particularly in it at that time.
So how's that process work to then be accepted on or join or train?
Yeah, well,
for that?
I mean, the selection process. So I thought about it, and then I said, yeah, fine. And he kind of said, well, look, I'll leave it with you. Here's a seminar on this date in this part of the country. Get yourself to it and just turn up and have a listen and see what you think. And it was like an open invitation for people in the police. And I took him up on that, and I went, and there were about 120 people that they accepted into this lecture hall, and then there were talks from different UCs from different places, and they explained what the work was about, what we expected, what the process, the selection process, everything else, and it was at the time of CDs, so I'm talking about 2005, around that, or 2004 maybe at that point. And probably 2004. And you took a CD away, and you could write your application on it and then submit it.
Can't even remember them days.
No, you won't. You won't remember that.
Oh, I do, mate.
Don't worry.
But that was that, and out of that 120, and I didn't have a clue. I mean, you had people turned up there. Some people turned up looking like they were a member of the Hells Angels because they thought that's what it was more fun. There were people there that worked in IT in places, just came with a packed lunch, and they sat there in the lecture hall just because they get out of the office for the day. You know, there were a lot of real combination of people. It was quite fascinating to look at who would turn up at something like that. I was just like in a chino. I didn't know what to wear. I was like in chinos and a shirt. I was
like kind of like an open day where you must have semi been invited, and then this is how it is.
Yeah, I mean, they would advertise because you start off open, because otherwise how are you ever going to get people in?
I take it they're looking at you at that point.
Yeah, I think they were probably looking around the room.
Look going.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But that was the first point. And then out of that 120 people, they took 6 people to interview. And that was in the southeast. So that was and the selection process from then on took over a year. I was one of the 6, obviously, that got interviewed to go on to the next stage, and I was the only one that went through out of those 6. And that was a few alarm bells that ringing at that point for me in my head from a nervous point of view, because then I'm thinking, well, who else am I going to go through the rest of the process with? Because they explained right at the start it's a 6-stage process, but they didn't tell you what each stage was. They just said this is stage 1. So I was like, oh.
So you went from 120.
Yeah.
And then 6 start the training.
Yeah, and I went into stage 2, just me.
I know, flipping heck.
Yeah.
Imagine the cost of that.
Yeah. Well, this was the thing as well, because now I'm thinking, well, I've got these other stages to do, so there must be other people joining. But this is, bearing in mind that open day, as you quite rightly describe it, was for the southeast of the country. So there's
it's going on everywhere.
It's going on everywhere else as well, you know.
So you combine them with other.
Yeah. And then it goes down and goes down.
Can you talk about any of the training, mate? Is that something you can talk about? The sort of things you went through in that?
Well, there wasn't really at those early stages. There wasn't really any training. They would put you through. It was so the first stage is, it's changed now. So I'm quite happy to talk about it because it's not going to affect the guys and girls that are out there doing it now. But it was the first stage was like a regional interview with a panel, and then they would talk about your suitability. They'd give you scenarios. They'd ask you to discuss them, how you deal with it. They were looking at how ingrained the police had become in you, I think, as well, for terminology and stuff like this, and how much work.
Right, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? How much work would need to be done to get you back out of that?
So this is, we're looking 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So obviously, I suppose at that point, in the age you were at that time, you wouldn't fully be aware, and this is a new thing to you anyway, of what parts of your character they're liking or want for that job.
Yeah.
You just being you, and they going,
Yeah.
But they're not selecting you at that point for a particular job, are they?
No.
No.
Not at all.
It's not like, he'll be great because he'll fit that crowd we want to get into. Or...
Yeah, and I hadn't done the natural route either, so I hadn't been a test purchaser and done that foundation level either. So I was just going in at that level with no experience of doing it. So I was just turning up as me, really, and chatting with them. And I remember at the early stages, sort of stage 1 and stage 2, I was kind of like, I've got a decent job. I've been asked to come and do this. So actually, if I do fail this, it will be a shame, but it's not the end of the world.
Take the pressure off yourself. Then.
Yeah, I can just go back to what I was doing, you know. So I probably approached it a little bit like that as well. I think not in an arrogant way, but in a way that it wasn't everything to me. You know, I could carry on. And then there's like, I can't remember what stage it's the 3rd or 4th stage is a psychometric phase, which I ended up going up north for that because there was no one in the south left in the selection, and I was with a load of guys from like Manchester and girls. The girls still in the group as well. In the group I met at that point, and that again, I think 7 or 8 of us turned up, and about 3 of us got through that and went on. Then there's a national interview. And then the last phase is the actual course, and that's where all the and at that time you could only do it once as well. Now my mindset had really changed by this point because I'm like a year down the line from the first stage, from the open day, and now I'm like, I've got this far, I can't muck this up on the last phase. And so I remember turning up in London, and just thinking, I've got to smash this. This has got to work now. And I was with people and at that point it's become international. So the ones that have succeeded in England and Scotland, etc., and Wales are on that course, and then we've got students from other countries as well that have come over to get the accreditation. So that was a real sort of, there was 12 people on it. That was a real eye opener for me at that point. And that course, I probably will never forget that. The next period of time that went through that, and that was horrendous. Because I think if you, obviously it's simulated. You know, you're on a course. You know nothing's really bad's going to happen to you, but they do everything they can to make it as bad as possible as quickly as possible. So you're deprived of sleep. You're put under pressure constantly. You don't know how much sleep you're going to get, and you're constantly being thrown into scenario after scenario. And the debriefing as well of each one was brutal. I mean, like you would, I've never heard so many swear words in one, and you know, there was nothing sort of constructive about it. And the process as well of leaving when you hadn't done enough was equally brutal. You'd be sat in the classroom, say when you started with 12, and one of the instructors the door would open, and they'd just call someone, and you never knew. You didn't know what the itinerary was for the course anyway. You didn't know the schedule.
Don't know how long it's going to be.
You didn't know. Yeah, no, you didn't. We didn't know what each day would consist of.
That's difficult for your mind to deal with.
Yeah, and but that was one of many things that you were struggling to deal with. You know, so it just didn't help. But it became like the norm, and the door would open. They'd just call someone out. So you think, oh, they're going off to do something else. They're going to be tested somewhere else, and then you're trying to listen to either a presentation or another scenario that's happening, and that person's left, and then another instructor can just get all their stuff, and you never see them again. And then that evening, they'd just say to you, "Oh, Jamie, just take him out your phone," and that's it. That's it. So like then you're down to 11.
It's all gameplay, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Even some of the
it's all to do with you. It was exactly that. It was all gameplay. It was all seeing how you react, whether you got aggressive, when you got confronted, whether you got scared. They were just testing every part of your personality and pushing you into as many different directions.
Because the smart play is like some of the students are actually undercover.
Yeah, you know, and that it was, even up to the end of the course, and I got taken out. That I got to the last day, and there was a particular lesson that you had to pass. They explained it to us. You've got to have passed to be in it, because otherwise they're not going to give this particular tactic away to you. So I remember sitting there, and that was in the afternoon. I'm thinking, all I need to do is get through till like 12 o'clock. If I get through to that, I'm golden here. And it was about 11:30, and no one had been called out of the room. And I'm like, oh. And then the same guy turns up at the door, and he just asked me to come out. I'm like, please, just give me the good news here. And he called me into another room, and he said, "I'm so sorry, mate. We've got to call it now, because we've got this lesson. You haven't been successful." I was like, last day. I thought, I just sat there like reflecting on it. I just thought, oh my God, that is. I went, all right, thanks very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. He said, anything else? I went, no. He said, I'll get yourself through that door there then. And I just went through, and there was a big congratulations.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So that's what I'm saying. So it was like, it never stopped.
Mind games.
It never stopped even right at
And he went through that door, and they went, "No, only joking, you'll fail."
Yeah, through another door. Yeah, out there's your car. So it was, that was kind of, that was funny. But then, but really, that's like, that all that process, that whole year is like learning to drive the whole time, and then you can drive. You don't, because all you've done scenario. You haven't done any jobs. So all you're really allowed to do then is to go and work with people that are actually doing it.
Do you think at this point at all there must be something in your character that other people can see that go, why do they think I could be, like,
good bloke?
I must be a bad guy. Or you must come across as like
a bad guy.
To be accepted socially.
If you're going to work in different criminal organizations.
I think social chameleon.
Yeah, well, that term, mate, that term is used loads. Social chameleon, not about me, about that work, about that industry, because of course you have to be. It was once described to me that if you're the sort of person that's in a pub and you never met anyone, and you stop and have a pint with them, if you then leave. And that person thinks, fucking hell, if he comes back in the pub, I'm not going to go down that end of the bar. I do not want to speak to him again. Do you know what I mean? And we've all met him. Then you're not the person for that job. So you kind of, I suppose, you have to try and get yourself to a point where you can leave a good impression on people when you meet them. And then that would depend on how successful you are.
Great storyteller.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. So
because you're just living in stories all the time.
Yeah, constantly, yeah. And you're not, and certainly as you as we go on to it, because at that point, even passing that course, I didn't know what type of work I would get involved in as an undercover.
So what was the first sort of work you started doing? And you shadowing someone then when you
yeah? So I joined the unit full time. I stayed there then for the next 11 years. I was full time. That's all I did. But when I first started, I was like like the T-boy. You get in there and you've managed to get through the course, which was great. Personally, it was great, but also it was good for the unit because there's not that many people coming through, so they got an addition to their numbers. And then I just needed to learn then what was what. And the first job, what you'd kind of normally do then would be say if one of you guys had a job and you've been on it for a couple of years, you obviously need friends and you need people that are going to help you out. So I would get a brief to come and meet you and be your mate, and I might do a bit of running around for you or a little bit of something like that. So that there are parts that you can do to start off with, and that's what I kind of thought I was going to do, and then very quickly I got the job, which I know you've mentioned in the title, of a contract killing came into the office, and that was. Would normally be quite straightforward for someone junior like me because I'd play a very small part in it. And just
this is right at the beginning of your time.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably my first proper job that I even got involved in, and I should have been given a part where ring the person and to explain the background briefly. So somebody's been approached in a pub by a really nice like an acquaintance of his, as far as he's concerned. And just says, I know you were in the army. I've got a friend that wants someone killed. Is that something you'd be interested in? And the guy's like, no, because I've got a job and I don't kill people. And he went, oh, okay, fair enough. And it was left there. Well, the guy that got approached then goes home and thinks to himself, well, if they've approached me, they could have approached a number of people here. And I don't want to get involved in any of this. So he reports it in. Oh, okay. And of course then...
one day it will start.
Yeah, so he reports it into the police. The police obviously don't know what to do with that. So it ends up on a department like the one that I just joined. And they said, is there anything you can do with this? And they said, yeah, we can provide a contract killer, potentially, if it's a genuine threat. Because, of course, the priority is the preservation of life of the person that's on the end of that contract. So to check how authentic it is a priority. And then one of the ways to do that would be to get someone like me deployed, contact the people that want the killing done and see how real it is. So normally I would have just been involved in doing the phone call and then arranging a meet, but I wouldn't have done the meet because I wasn't that experienced. So someone else would do that. But on this particular occasion, the guy that was approached in the pub just went, I'm quite happy to go to court and give evidence about this because this is outrageous. So they didn't need that process of putting a lot of people through. And they were quite happy for me just to run with it. And so I got given the task of contacting the gentleman that needed the work doing and then arranging a meeting with him, which I was then going to...
So that was the guy that was first approached, part of that process, and he suddenly becomes...
Yeah, so the
he's
guy...
like linking you all up and...
Yeah, so the guy... So he doesn't... So I make a phone call and I basically say to the person who's... who, the number that I've been given, a friend of mine's contacted me, he says he can't help you out, but I can. Do you want to meet up? That as a little bit more refined than that, but that's basically in a nutshell. In fact, it was quite funny because I'm still in this kind of stage of being taught, and I've used the public phone and rang the guy up somewhere in London, and my cover officer, the guy that's looking after me and teaching me, he stood outside the phone box, and when I finished the call, and I've arranged a meeting, it's going to be in a few days' time. I'll put the phone down. I'll come out. He's like, no. You didn't sound anything like a contract killer. I was like, well, what is that? I don't understand. What does a contract killer sound like? Yeah. He said, we should have been a bit more menacing. I was like, why? I'm meeting him to organise the job. Surely I'll just be me, won't I? And he's like, oh, right, well, you'll learn as you go on. And so that was my first one. So aside from that bollocking, then I arranged the meeting and then we went on to the next.
You meet him in person?
Yeah, I met him. Yeah, there were a number of meetings that took place on that job. The first one with him, I'd arranged the place. I'd said to him, like, I'm really like quite strong on sort of punctuality, so I could do it. You could do with getting there on time. I didn't know at the time, but he was a very successful businessman, so he was of a mindset that's not a problem. He's just going to turn up on time and he'll get there. So I met him. We met in the car that I had. He jumped in. He pulled up in his own car and got in mine, and then we started chatting. And he explained that he was in a relationship with a woman, and it was the woman that actually wanted the killing to happen. And she used to be with someone, and it's that person's new partner. It's the woman she wants killing. And because the reason she wants her killed is so that she can have the house back. So that's it. And he's explaining this story to me, and I'm trying to remember as much as I can. And I'm sort of saying to her, and I had like a checklist of things, mental one that I'd been given of stuff to sort of tick off as I'm going through, points I needed to get out and all this. And so he explains it. He said, look, it's up to you how you do it. You can run her over. You can do whatever you want to do. But ultimately, she's got to end up dead. And I was like, right, okay. Arranged a meeting. I think it probably a few days later, possibly a week later, I can't remember. But it was that was all geared up to that then. And then I had a checklist of things to do in that meeting with him. So I arranged a public place, a car park, which was another... We arranged it in a public car park because, of course, there's always a fear that for him, he's meeting someone that is claiming to be capable of killing somebody. So we want to try and make it as reasonable as possible.
I take it he was pretty nervous as well.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. Yeah. As was I, actually, because I didn't expect to be rolling out as a contract killer.
Well, obviously, when you go into your training, I can't imagine you go, right, now you're on the contract killing phase. Like, you don't go, we're going to spend a week teaching it because you're like, you must be just doing, or what? You must be thinking, how should I behave as a contract killer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of undercover work is governed by stated cases. Then we'd had an input on different cases that had happened in the past where people had paid for other people to be killed, and that's where a lot of the information comes from. Previous experiences that people have done, but you don't go down a route of that's going to be my job, because to be fair, the amount of actual contract killings that the police managed to get hold of, you'd be unemployed for 90% of the time. It's not that.
So what sort of guy was this, and like who was he wanting killed?
So he was. So the guy that I met was a very successful businessman, very high up at like C-suite level in a company.
Global brand,
yeah. And he was in a relationship with a woman of a very similar description, different company, but again C-suite, global brand. That woman had been in a relationship with a previous partner who'd now moved on and was in a new relationship, and it was the woman in the new relationship that they wanted killing. And the reason they wanted her killed was because these two are living in a big country residence, and she wants it back because that's where she used to live. And I had this checklist of things I was ticking off mentally as I'm sitting talking to him, and he explained that they'd not actually ever physically met, so this was just a job that needed doing. There wasn't a personal grievance. It was just this woman had to go.
Was it an affair?
No, he as I understand it, he'd left her and then had found a new woman. But the circumstances
she wanted that house.
Yeah, she wanted the house, and the only way that she was going to get the house is if they weren't in it. And the best way to do that was to kill the woman, and that would affect him, and that teach him a lesson because he'd moved on.
So how soon are you talking about? Well, one, that they know you're a good killer, like you've done it before. Like, you're not going to get testimonials, do you? But
no,
how does that all work?
Yeah, do you go like, I'm kind of a big deal in the, in the contract killing world?
You must have heard of me. TikTok. But no, that's a really good question, because what ended up happening, I had a couple of meetings with him. On the end of the second meeting, and this is all progressing. We're talking about how it's going to get done, whether it's going to be a car crash, whether she's going to end up subject of a really vicious assault that goes wrong, all this type of stuff, conversations. But ultimately, he'd explained that it was his partner that wanted it doing. And so I got to a point where I said to him, who's paying for this? And he said, well, she will be. And so I said, well, I need to meet her then. Because unlike me doing a service for you, if you don't like it, there's no returns policy on this. Once we go down the road with this, as far as they're concerned, obviously, once we go down the road, there's no going back. So I need to sit down, I need to look at her in the eye, and I need to know that she wants this doing. And he went, yeah, fair enough. I'll go home and speak to her. And she was abroad with work, and then I get a phone call. I'd supplied a couple of burner phones for them and me, and I get a phone call to say, yeah, she's on the next meeting. And that was number 3, as in meeting number 3.
Is that when you start discussing pricing and stuff? Then?
That's when I started. That's when you just asked me about the testimonials. She arrived. It was the same place. He wasn't there. She was, so she'd replaced him. She just sat in the car, and it was like having a business meeting. She got in with a notebook, and as she sat there, she had it on her lap, and she introduced herself, very polite. And I saw this list in a notebook, and she just started working her way down it. It's like she was in a business meeting. And one of the questions she said to me was, right, I don't obviously know anything about you, and when I recruit people, I like to know a little bit about their background. So my guess,
got a HR person.
It was bizarre. And she said like, I'll tell you first of all what I'm thinking, and then you can fill the gaps in. So I'm sitting thinking, I don't need this. This is not where I need this to be going. And so she's, and I've got a checklist in my own head that I've been given that morning as well for things I need to get out of this meeting. So I'm thinking, this is all like overload here. And she says, I'm guessing that you've done this sort of work on a government level before, but I don't know whether you've done it on a personal level. So I need you to give me a little bit of background on that so that I can satisfy myself you're the right guy for the job. So I was like, And I wasn't prepared really for that, So I was kind of like, I said, do you mind if next month I use this job to get my next one? And she went, you definitely do not do that. I said, well, probably best you don't ask me about last month's then.
Oh, no.
Good answer, man.
Oh, mate, but I was
on your feet.
Oh, yeah, but I was flapping. It was like one of them where it was all calm, sat in the car, but it wasn't. It was like the Swan, that thing. It was like flapping, and she just and I sort of like looking, thinking, where's this going? Because I didn't want to annoy her, because ultimately what we're trying to do is keep the contract. Because if we've got the contract, then someone else hasn't got it, and this woman's it's not going to happen, right? So
for context, this is a senior member of a multi-billion-pound company here. They're like, so you don't get that position unless you're a little bit of a psychopath.
And she's ruthless in a lot of. You talk about people, you talk about successful business people that are classified as psychopaths and this, that, and the other, but by the way they're driven. But she just ticked it and then moved on to the next thing, which I was very pleased about, but that was that. And then had that meeting went okay with her. And then we went into the next one where we were going to talk about pricing and different things like that. And again, how'd you price up a contract? Well, if you look back in history, there's been like £1,000 being paid out. There's been £60,000 if you go through stated cases. So you're trying to gauge it to. You don't want it to be unrealistic, but at the same time, if I say to her, I'll do it for £500, she's like, well, who's this guy? What does he need £500 for? So you're trying to gauge it out, and we gauged it out with a few minds together, and we worked out that maybe £10,000 would be a reasonable amount for what they were asking.
Seems cheap to me.
Yeah, well, I didn't. And again, I mean, it's pretty subjective. Like I didn't really know where to go with that. But I was like, £10,000, okay.
20 years ago, right?
Huh?
20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years. And it is, of course, it is 20 years ago. Maybe it would go up now.
I don't know. 20 grand.
I don't do them now. But that was the figure, and it wasn't. I didn't really get when that came out. I didn't get much of a reaction. It was like, yeah, okay, fine. And whether they thought that's a result or whatever, I don't know. They never haggled. So it was that was that. But the start of the fourth one, when we went in a completely different direction. She's arrived, got in the car, sat down. It's nice to see you again. Yeah, and you. Right, let's push on with this. And she just turned around and said, I've been thinking about it. I don't want her killed. It's like mixed emotions with that.
Do you think you're losing the case?
Yeah, potentially, but equally, that's good that she's changed her mind. Maybe she's gone down a road. There's a lot of work that goes on with things like that where legally we have to do, as in the police, in preparation for court and stuff. Because if you go into business with a contract killer, it's a great defence to then say, as soon as I met them, I felt like I could be a victim if I pulled out of it. So I kept going with it because I was worried because of the nature of their work. So there's a lot of work that goes on to try and negate that.
Just if she says no now,
Yeah,
she hasn't committed any crime there, has she?
no, because when you're talking about conspiracy to murder or soliciting to murder and this, that, and the other, you get to a point where the CPS would decide it's complete. But as far as she's concerned, in this early preparation stage of talking about it, there's no actual physical preparation that's been done, etc., etc. It would have been probably a good time for her to pull out. But equally, she's perfectly within her rights. And I'd explained on a number of occasions, if you decide to pull the plug on this before we get to a stage where it's difficult to pull the plug, then that's cool. And this is just a business transaction. As long as my expenses are covered, you'll never see me again. And that had been repeated and repeated because of that intimidation issue later on down the line.
Did you take any fees up to that point? Like, like mobilisation fees, like we want to start looking into doing this case, I want some money up front.
Yeah, so I'd spoken about expenses, spoken about petrol, I'd spoken about the phones.
So even that would be used in the case, then, even if you didn't go through with it, she'd already started.
Yeah, there's a bill which is being written up, right?
I think what's the word? Like, I know you just if you wasn't there, that person wouldn't have committed the crime. You were kind of laying the pieces up. I kind of guess the word.
Like state generated.
Yeah,
you mean like as in if I hadn't given them the opportunity to do it,
they
would have never done the thing in the first,
But with that, to be fair, if we hadn't have taken the contract, we don't know that guy's just constantly looking for other people. Yeah. So we're just trying to control the contract. I mean, and it's unusual you're not going to have two people out there. It'd be very unusual to pay two people to do the same job because that'd just be messy, right? Yeah. So you can kind of assume in a hopeful way that we're the only ones who've got it, or I'm the only one who's got that contract.
So she's decided not to do it then at this point?
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
The next thing she said, you couldn't have anticipated. And that was, she said to me, I think if you kill her, it'll be too sudden. And no one's really going to suffer. So what I want you to do is either blind her or paralyse her. Because if you do that, in this country residence they live in, they're not going to be able to live there anymore because it's low ceilings and they won't get any wheelchair access in. So either way,
what a psychopath.
Either way, they're going to have to move out and I get the house. So I think this is the way forward for everyone.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That must have taken you back a bit.
Yeah, that was, because I'd just gone from have we got any offences? Where am we going with this? To now I've got and then I'm sitting there contemplating it and she says, is it still the same price? I went, yeah, it's still the same price, yeah. Okay. Tick. I was like, whoa, this is getting dark. And then we spoke about, she said, so how'd you, and you have to get involved in it because now everyone's getting their hands dirty with this, right? So it's like, well, how are you going to do that then? I said, well, paralysing is going to be quite difficult because I've got to sever her spinal cord. In order to do that, I might end up killing her. And so she's like, yeah, I don't want that. I don't want you to kill her. That's the point. That's why we're moving on. I said, well, then I suppose the best way to do it is to break into her house while she's there on her own and the partner's out. And it'll be like a reverse burglary. So I'll go and attack her first. And then on the way out, I'll sort of like grab some stuff and mess it up a little bit and go. And what I'll do is I'll probably just set about her with a screwdriver or something that I just had in my hand. And so it doesn't actually look like, that I've gone to attack her. And she went, yeah, okay. She said, she said, we could definitely get her eyes. I said, well, yeah, I'll set about her face and then I'll include her eyes in that. And then she said, well, can you also make sure, now this is, we go back to this global C-suite person, if you imagine that person in your mind. I'm describing stuff I'd never have that conversation, expect to have that conversation with them. And then she said, can you also, when you're doing that thing with can you get her chest as well? Because women like to wear low tops sometimes, and she'll never have that option. I was like, yeah, okay. So eyes and chest. She's like, yeah, I think I'll do it, yeah. Yeah, do that. Okay. And that's kind of where, and there we went from there.
Hell hath no fury.
Yeah. And she provided me with plans of the inside of the house because she'd obviously she'd lived there at a stage in her life. So she provided me with where the alarms were. where the locks were for the doors. I then physically went there when they were out and went into the grounds and photographed the locks, the windows. And so we had another meeting where we prepared. And when you're talking about the preparatory steps, now we're getting to a point where we're getting going. And
surely, if she paid you a deposit, that's the evidence.
Yeah, no, and generally, I then asked, and as part of that process, I asked for an amount of that.
How are you gathering evidence at this stage? You like got recording devices on your stuff?
Everything was recorded.
So every meeting you're having, you got a wire on and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite like that. They do that in the films, but yeah, everything inside that car was recorded, and yeah, I mean, and then I asked for a percentage of the money up front so I could cover costs that have been incurred so far, and to secure the contract. And then I was going to, on the day it was going to happen.
So you set a date for it to happen?
Yeah, but they didn't know that.
Right.
I said to them, from this meeting, and it was the final one, I mean, just talking about when we were talking about the house as well, they'd recently got a puppy. The potential victim, recently got a puppy, little Labrador. And she said to me, you just need to be mindful. I know from calls I've had with them that this puppy yaps a lot. It's a yappy thing. So that might cause you a problem if you're going in the middle of the night. And I said, I'll just sort the dog out on the way through to get to her. And that was almost a deal breaker, that line. And I learned that later in court because she said to me, do not touch that. Whatever you do not touch that dog because that dog is innocent.
She's dog lover then.
Dog lover, yeah. Yeah, she was, and that was a turning point.
For some animals to people, mate, to be fair.
The bit when you said, she cancelled the killing, before you went on to the horrific part after that, I was going to ask you, which now seems irrelevant, did you have any connection or like sympathy or empathy or like, was any likable thing with this woman? Do you have any connection thinking,
no.
I don't see how come this woman's plotting this?
No, it surprised me that that she could have the conversation she was having, and she was asked, and she would ask in the detail about what she wanted doing, but I didn't. There was no connection there, person to person. In that I thought, I could socialise with you outside of us planning to kill someone. There was nothing like that. I mean, no, it was just, it was just all very, very strange. She seemed very angry in the way she just came over.
So you're saying you set a date, but you don't tell them the date you're actually.
Yeah, I explained that to him. Right. I said, right, from this meeting onwards, the next phone call that you'll get will be to say to get rid of that phone, and asking for the other percentage of the money I haven't got yet, and then you can assume from that it's done, and then after that you'll know anyway because it'll be out there, and that was kind of and that was that, and then. On a certain day, which again they didn't know about, and there was no attempt from that point onwards to contact me because this is the other important thing. I said that phone will be on all the time. So if you change your mind, ring me, and if it's before it's done, then that's all cool as well.
And at this point, the potential victim has no idea this is going on.
No,
the police don't get involved with them and start giving them.
She had no idea, and she got a phone, and then. On a particular day, which was shortly after that, when the arrest was going to take place and everything else, prior to that, a police officer knocked on her door, the victim or potential victim, and just said, "Today was a day. We'll explain it all to you. You were meant to get killed, but you're not going to." And that was it.
There's actually risks with her because you obviously got somebody wanting to kill someone, really wanted to do it. There's a threat, quite a serious threat to life.
Yeah.
Because she could have just done it. I know obviously you can't tell that person because you need that person acting as normal and everything else, but it's still a bit of risk with that by not telling that person.
Yeah, very much so. And but equally there was a part where we wanted life to carry on, not knowing what they were looking at outside of our meetings. We wanted life to carry on as normal. So if for example, if she'd have decided to drive up there and everything was closed down, they'd moved out, and then you're like, well, where are we going with this? So there's a lot of that in that type of work. You try and keep everything as normal as possible to keep them entrusted in what's in the process. Of course, there's an element of risk there, but then we're coming in on the back end of a pretty dodgy situation anyway, really, you know. So just trying to keep it going. But it all worked out fine. And then
they're arrested that same day.
Yeah, they were arrested, and then it went to the Old Bailey.
When did they find out you were police in the trial?
I would imagine, and this is another thing, you don't have anything to do with that. Once my work, my part of it was a tiny part of a much bigger operation, you know, albeit it was the front part of it, but there was the investigation team and everything else, and they, I would imagine they probably introduced that during the interview process to secure the evidence, you know, like for example, the person that you've been meeting for last 6 weeks isn't a contract killer. Yeah. And etc.
They both went down for that, I take it.
Yeah, they both did for different offences, bizarrely, because one was got a soliciting as well as conspiracy. Yeah, so but it was interesting. No, they didn't. They got a number of years as opposed to life. There was just relatively short sentences, actually.
Like 2 years.
I genuinely can't remember because it was a remand period, and then I think it was probably like 8 years max or something.
Oh my God. That is that's shocking.
Yeah.
That's like.
But it was. I remember going to court. I had to go.
They probably saved half of that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Oh yeah, they probably would have at that stage. Yeah.
They'll be out now.
Yeah, I'll get 100%.
Is it, well, maybe it's a bit of where they come from in society, perhaps.
Potentially. I mean, there was a day that I had to go to court. I got a train into town. Got picked up and you go through. I was screened off and all this business. So you go through judges' chambers and up that way. And I remember getting off the train. And my cover officer that dealt with it all said, "You need to get yourself a copy of the Times. There might be a bit of press activity at the court." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, grabbed the paper, opened it, and there's a photograph of the two of them at a polo match socialising with a very high-ranking monarch. And I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah." So I thought there's gonna potentially there'd be a bit of press there, but you go through judges' chambers and that. What's funny, I went back that night, gave me evidence. I was in a couple of hours, no cross-examination. I think the QC was done. He was like, "That was it." Yeah, and it was just reading out recordings, and I was playing one part, and the barrister was playing another part, and we just read them out, and involving the dog and different bits and pieces. And I remember getting home, Fiona Bruce, you know, the newsreader, and they'd done a reconstruction, and it was the two of us sat in a car, like silhouetted. Two of us sat in a car, and in court, they can't physically describe what you look like if you got anonymity or your voice. And I'm convinced they got Julian Clary to play the part of me. It was. I wish I'd recorded it. It was just.
I thought you were going to say Tom Hardy then or something. Played you in the reconstruction.
No, nothing like it. It was just
funny. Mate.
Yeah, it was unreal.
Well, the first time I met you, mate, you come across with Julian Clary sort of.
Yeah, that's it. No, I think that's why. I think it's some clever screening. Like it was. So that was
a mad first job.
Yeah, it was a mad first job
like that as your first job.
Yeah,
how soon you then bouncing from that job to another one?
Well, that one was kind of was almost like because I was doing weekly meetings. I was doing stuff in between that as well, you know. So I was kind of learning my trade, and then having these weekly appointments with these guys, and so 90% of the time I was doing something else. And then quite quickly after that, I got my first job, which was like long term. That was like infiltration. I met a guy on a course that we would to do with UC work, and he said, "I've just got a job it's a 2-year job, a community infiltration. I'd like you to come down and do it with me." And so they approached my team and said, "Can we have him?"
And you pretty much live in another life for a couple of years. Then.
Yeah, and then I bounced from one infiltration to another, and so you sort of, that was really where you start learning then. Because they weren't big in the south of England, they weren't massive.
It's just like you need a cover story and backstory for that.
Oh yeah, I mean that a lot of that's supplied for you anyway at that level. You're very lucky. So it's actually harder, I think, deploying You know, like when we talk about test purchasers, I think in some respects it's harder deploying like that because you've got nothing around you. You know, you've got no other identities or anything. When you go to that different level, you've got all that stuff supplied. And so you've got a different wallet, you got different everything. You know, like exactly what you would have to supply, I could supply that. So that kind of made it a bit easier. But on the flip side, you're there doing it on the daily.
Can you explain about how you go about infiltrating then? How that process works? You don't have to talk about a particular case, but how you would go about, you know, getting into a community or getting into...
Yeah, so if it was let's say if it was a community slightly different to an organised crime group. Yeah. If it was a community, you'd get yourself, you'd move in, you'd be in...
So like literally like a flat house nearby?
Yeah, flat, you set it to where you want to sort of set yourself in society. Yeah. So if you're going to be, it depends what the problem is in that community. And let's be honest, this isn't done on a daily. This isn't done in all communities. Yeah. There's got to be a significant problem in that community to even deploy that tactic. And other things have got to be tried. And so it was kind of like, you know, you've got a massive drug problem, or you've got a serious crime like murder problems and all this business. Then you might be put into a community. And so generally you'd look at where the biggest problems were, or a team would, and then they'd say, right, we're going to put a UC in there. And so you would go in, you'd start off, if they would say like there were two really bad pubs that you just couldn't get in because of what went on, and they're just absolute open days for crime, then you'd work out and keep working until you get yourself in there. So you might be embedding yourself for the first 6 months and then starting to do a little bit of criminality. Obviously you're all authorised. And then you would start to befriend certain people that'd be useful, and then you'd work your way in. And that would be, it could take you a year to even get through the door of where you need to be before you start becoming useful.
Authorised, obviously you've got to make decisions on the ground. You're obviously committing a certain level of crime.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you and it's important, that part of it is really important because you're allowed to commit certain crimes. You're allowed to certainly, like, give the illusion of committing other crimes,
like selling cigarettes,
drink, all that sort of stuff,
drugs,
all clothing, you know, knocked off clothing, all that sort of stuff. All that stuff goes on, but it may be that actually it's not stolen what you're selling, but you're
making it look like
it is, right? So there's that element of it. There's crimes that go on that you can get involved in. So, like, say if you're, like, I'll give you an example. There was a group that. I'd spent like a year and a half. I was in with this group of guys. They were all criminals. I was the only UC involved in that, and they were organising a ram raid where they were going to take a load of sports shirts out of like a massive, on an industrial estate. They were just going to put a motor through the window, just load it all up, and then take it to a lockup. Now, the reason I was involved in that was, one, because I was with that gang anyway, but also I had a lockup, so I was really useful to them. Now, the useful part, the part of that perhaps will be most beneficial, would be, look, I'm not on the ram raid, obviously, but I will be at the lockup, you know, that type. So I'm involved in criminality, but I've sort of taken on a minor part. But the interesting thing about all that is you have like a senior investigating officer that deals with all of these jobs, and he might have been appointed it, and his history might have been good detective, dealt with major crimes, but not necessarily an undercover deployment. So, because there's not that many that know about the tactic as such.
Oh, because you're working for wherever where the crime is. You're not working for kind of the undercover unit.
Yeah, so you don't take, it's not like a circus that travels and then you say, right, now we're going to deal with that job. You get lent to an area that's got a problem. So they're now dealing with a job, and then they say, right, and you get certain people signed off on it. You only meet certain people. You never go to a police station. You never do any of that stuff. So this senior investigating officer might meet you once every few months.
I assume you get into you might go there for a particular job, but ends up growing into a different one.
Yeah,
because you end up meeting another like criminal gang, and suddenly you're like, this is growing legs here, and
or there's jobs that come off of it. So you carry on your main job, and then you get other little ones that come off, and you might bring people in, or you know, it does. It like that grows legs. But that ram raid, for example, I met the senior investigating officer, came in, and I said, "Oh, hello, boss, nice to meet you. Just to run this by you." And it was like a handshaking thing for him, you know, like, "I hope you're getting all right. I hope the guys are looking after you," and all this business.
I said, which guys? The bad guys?
the team that have been allocated. So it's like, it's the same little team you work with for all the time you're there. And so I said, oh yeah, we're just in the middle of organising a ram raid at the moment. So I just wanted to run it by you, because I know you'll ultimately be making the decisions here. What job do you want me to do on the ram raid? Knowing that this playing a minor part will be key in his mind. And he said, and I'll explain why in a minute, where he came to this decision. He said, I think driver of the ram raid. And he went, I think so, yeah. I said, you know the plan's to put the car through the window of the sports shop? And he went, oh yeah. I said, and then if the police turn up, it'll be a chase. He's like, oh yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. Now, where that had come from in his mind was there used to be like a lesson where like if you're going to go, like say if there was a burglary, be the driver sitting outside, the lookout, rather than being there. Yeah. And there was another one where this same guy, it was probably about 6 months later, he's turned up for his next meeting, and the night before I'd been in a pub, and this bloke who I was chatting with, I hadn't met him before, but he was a key feature for them, which I didn't realise until I handed it back in. This guy in the pub says, all right, I'll tell you what, mate, we'll go out tomorrow night. I'll run 2 brothels in town. He said, we'll go to the first one. On the way out, you can pick the girl you want, have her. Then we'll go out. I'll bring a load of Charlie. We'll do that while we're out. And then on the way home, we'll go to the other brothel, which is the other side of town. You can pick a different girl because there's different ones in each one. How's that sound for a night out? I was like, oh, yeah, sounds busy. Yep, okay. So I'm now, a day later, I'm now sitting in front of this SIO, and I say to him, I've got to run this by you, boss. No, for all I'm just going to shit can the night, right? It's not that night's not going to happen. But I said to him, I'll run that story out to him. I said, what are you happy with there? Is there anything, any concerns? And he went, oh, right. So it's his brothel. I'm thinking, where's he going with this? I said, yeah, he runs them both. Yeah, he owns them. He said, right. You definitely can't do the coke. I said, well, if it helps, I'm not going to do a prostitute either. He went, oh, good. Yeah, good. Yeah. He said, I was just trying to think on the criminal side.
I was just testing you.
Yeah. But he was like on the legal side. I was just trying to work out what you could and couldn't do. And I knew the coke you couldn't, but I wasn't sure if he was paying, whether you could. I said, no, I can't. And he was like, okay, good. Yeah, okay.
Sorry, mate, just on the coke, I think I've asked you this before over a point, but you make it look like you are taking it, right? Because in a lot of situations you're going to be. If you got a reason not to take it, or how do you what's your cover story for that?
That's really difficult.
That's going to stand out.
Yeah, no, that's really difficult. I mean, the bottom line is, unless it's life threatening, it's not going to happen. Right. And as in immediately life threatening to you in a situation. So you try and build it. And I don't want to. What I don't want to do is go down the tactics line of things, because there's still people out there grafting. Right, but you, generally speaking, you'll have a reason not to take it, and that might be supported by paperwork and other bits and
your cover story.
Yeah, I mean, cover story. Yeah, and certainly as you're a bit older,
that'd be a red flag, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, to them. But you've got to.
Maintain.
You have to maintain the legal side of things, but equally you've got to accept that that's a red flag. So you've got to see it coming, and you've got to get over it. And if you can't get over it, then you're not going to stay there.
You ever been bubbled on a job, like seen like that your cover's been blown, or?
So I did. I had to go to Clackett Lane Services once. And all I was given was a 2 kilos. I had a surveillance team behind me, 2 kilo sized box of coke, and put it from. I had to meet a guy, take it out of my car, put it in his van, and he was going to drive off with it. Met him in the car park. Never seen him before. Didn't know who he was, and his hands were shaking. He was like all over the place. So I said to him, "Mate, before we do the trade here, do you want to just go and get a coffee? Because you're shaking like a shitting dog, you know." And he sort of went, yeah, let's do that, let's do it. So as we were walking into Clackett, one of my, like a family friend, is walking out, and it was raining, and Clackett Lane is like paving slabs, so everyone's in and out, is all brushing past each other because no one wants to walk on the grass. And I just heard my name called, and this guy's like in a like a pinstripe suit, carrying a case. So he called and I just went, "Hi, how you doing?" Carried on going. Luckily, because it was raining, it was quite a natural thing to just carry on doing. And this bloke turned to me and goes, how'd you know him? Is he your brief? And I was like, how can you tell that? And he went, "Oh, mate, I've just got an eye for it. I've just got an eye for stuff like that." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool, yeah." So, and that was it. It was left like that. And then I phoned my brother up and went, apologised to him if he thought I was rude. I couldn't speak to him later on, But that was, so I had that. And I've also done another job where it was a barmaid behind there for about a year and a half. She worked behind the bar in a pub that I was doing everything in. I was putting stuff behind the counters and I was embedded in this pub and she knew me really well. And then that job finished. Load of people got banged up in the pub. I moved away. And then probably a year later, maybe 18 months later, I was miles away on another job and went to meet someone in a beer garden. And as I'm coming through with a couple of beers, that girl is sat at a table with a load of balloons around her and friends, and she's having a birthday party and she's opening presents. I was like, oh no, because she would have known 100% everything that had gone on in that pub. Yeah. And now I'm a few months into a new job in a completely different place. So I just put the beers down on the table. I carried on walking towards him. He was like at the table next door. Dropped the beers. I went, "Mate, I'll ring you in a second. I've got to go." And then I walked straight out. I rang him up and I said, "There's one of the girls on that table, mate. I can't be anywhere near. She's made an accusation about me to do with like a relationship and all this." And he loved it. He was like, "Right, I'll tell you what. I'll stay here. I'll let you know when they move, and we'll see where they go." And so we avoid it. And he just bought into it. But yeah. So I've had a couple of ones like that, which are, but nothing major. Not compromises about who I am. I've had difficult situations on a job where they don't know who I am and challenges, but not where I've bumped into people outside that I know. And
mate, before you go back into some jobs, I wanted to ask you for people watching, I suppose. I know you've kind of seen this on films, but obviously you've got a family at this point.
Yeah.
It's not like a normal job where you're like, "I'm off now, guys. It's 5 o'clock." Where does like holidays or like take your kids' football games and you've like, if you're living that life, and obviously the more you're in it, the better you become and everything. And the more how do you go? I've got to go now.
I think ultimately
got to pick the kids up from school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately what happens is whether you like it or not, or whether I like it or not, you become very selfish in what you're doing at that time because you're away and that's what you're focusing on. I was lucky that I had a very independent partner who was capable of just cracking on. And I think without her, I wouldn't have been able to work as long as I did. I also think there's a shelf life on this sort of work, which is weird because it takes so long to get to a certain point. So you kind of feel like you shouldn't pull the plug at years 3 or 4, but actually for your own sort of well-being, that's probably where it should get called, because you become a victim of your own success, or the work is a victim of its own success. So if you do a good deployment, then a cover officer from another part of the country wants to do a similar thing. So he just says, "Well, can we use that?
Do that again.
Can we use that guy or that girl? And we'll get them over and we'll do it again." So you have a week off and now you're bouncing on to another one. But to get home, you still need to go home, but you build in time when you're like, "I'm going to do business somewhere else in the country and it's going to take me," you have a reason to be there, but your phone's always there with you, so you're sort of like, you're still taking calls, you're still doing stuff that means you're not giving to your family.
Off the job, really.
No, not at that stage, no. And that's the selfish part, because you're never fully bought into where you should be, at home.
Still must be difficult to extract from, I said, "No, I'm going to go and do this job for," say you got 2 weeks in Tenerife with the missus and kids, now you're going, "Oh, I'm going to be away for 2 weeks." It must be really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, there's times when I've just said, I'm going, I'll be on a job and I'll say, I've started seeing this girl and she's got some kids and I'm going to go on holiday with her for a week or two, because that's pretty normal, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But that's what that's doing, is when you pick that phone up, that's covering the noise in the background and all this business. And I'd normally try and, at that time, my kids were young, so I'd normally try and build in that I've got a mate who's going as well, because then if one of them shouts out "Daddy," It's not to me, it's to someone else, and all that type of stuff. You know, so you sort of you put all these things in place to try and protect yourself, like, you know. But yeah, you become pretty selfish with it. I think I'll come back and I'll be back for a couple of days, and all I'll be thinking about is a trade that I'm going to try and sort out later on that week. And
exhausting, mate, right?
Yeah.
As a job.
Oh yeah, I think I look back
mentally as much as physically, or mentally to be on that.
It's not switching off at 5 o'clock, is it?
No, you're not really doing that. And there was some. I mean, one particular, like I said, you know, before Duncan, the one particular one where my job was to basically become a handler in this city, and just try and work a way up as high as I could. And it got to a point near the end of it where I was getting like a phone call 2 o'clock, and I'd be in my flat. Phone call 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, we got a couple of passports and some credit cards that we've just had out of an house. Do you want them? Yeah, cool. Bring them round. So that'd be that. And then another team would ring me up and say, we've got an Audi, like RS4 or whatever. We're just taking it off a drive. Do you want it? Yeah, cool. Bring that round. And be another car in the morning. And it's just, you know, but this is our teams that work. But then what you have to do is you've got to be then really careful, because that's what we were talking about earlier. Are these people going out and doing those jobs because they know there's someone on the phone that's going to take the stuff?
Yeah.
You know, and that's where you've got to tread really careful with that.
It's called the word, and I can't think what the word is. It's like a French word. You're creating that crime.
Yeah, I don't know the French for it, mate. But it was we used to call it. You're more educated than I am, Pete. No, but we used to call it. It was like state generated. You know, are we the people? Yeah, are we the people that are causing that crime peak in that area? And that. But equally, you also had a handle on other people that were handling in that city. So I had one side of the city, and there was a woman that had the other side of the city, and I'd meet up with her regularly, like once a week. And she was a drug dealer as well, so she would be dealing with all her gear. She was crap at maths, so to the point where she didn't know how many grams were in an ounce and how many ounces were in a key. So she was always shortchanging herself when she was bagging up. But I'd sit there and have a trait
for a drug dealer.
No, it's not great. It's not ideal. No, but it's like when you're in the pubs and like the little, the bagheads would come in and they'd be like, and they'd sell razors and meat and all that. You know, like you see it in pubs all the time, don't you?
Another meat auction, mate.
Yeah, I like meat. Yeah, but you get like a girl coming, she's going, "Oh, I've got Gillette free, Mac free razors, 1 for $1.50 or 3 for $5."
That's what
I went. Well, I'll have 3 for $4.50.
Plastic things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mate, you might not want to answer this, or you might just say no. But I suppose different to the contract killing, that's obviously a psychopath. But obviously you spend a long time with these people, and then your line of where the real person you are and the character, you must build up relationships with, and there's good in everyone, sort of thing. There must be any times you've gone, I can't do this. I like this guy. Like maybe his life is taking a certain direction. Like if I go this far now, he's getting imprisoned, and you're going, I can't do this. No,
that's a great question. There are people who are good in the criminal world who have become successful through their own right. A lot of them are great people. You can't. They've just chosen a path, right? Yeah. They've just chosen a route in life.
That's their job, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
This is my job.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And they're good, and they're really good at it.
And they would have been equally successful
had they
if they're in business.
Yeah.
Legitimate business.
But what? And there are times where I'm along the way or through certain paths, I've met people that aren't actually involved in criminality, but are swept up in a bigger job, and you're always trying to make it really clear to the people that are going to end up prosecuting all that. Actually, this guy he's right in amongst it, but he's not doing anything. And you're able to see that as well as to see who is, because ultimately the picture on the ground is always different to the one you get given, because it's intelligence that's fed into the police. It's rarely is it that accurate. But you have to be mindful as well. But personality-wise, I met some great people, but some great people doing some bad things. Ultimately, and I'm not in there as judge, jury, and everything else to decide who gets imprisoned and who doesn't. I can certainly put my stamp on it about who's doing what, but I can't I'm not gonna. I've never been. My dad said to me, police is another one. You know, my dad said before I joined, when he found out I wanted to join the police, he said, just do not, whatever you do, become a bent copper, because there is nothing worse than that. And so my principles never changed, and I wouldn't have become one if he hadn't have said that. But you have to keep your own principles and morals, and as hard as that may be, and that is a difficult one sometimes when you actually really really like the person, but you're there for a reason, and that's what you're in there for ultimately.
Glad you said about a bent copper. You phrased it. My dad's ex. I'm going to say ex-bent copper, ex-policeman, ex-decent.
Sorry,
a decent copper, mate. Couldn't be any more decent. You, whether on purpose or accidentally, I would imagine what the public probably think there's more bent coppers than there actually is. I would imagine it's a fairly, very, very small, minute minority within the police. But do you ever come across, like, within the sort of storytelling where, say, you've got storytelling, so the sort of the thing you've gone into, say you're going after some organised criminal gang, and that's the target, and then you're like, oh, there's police here, you know, as in,
So I've deployed against corrupt police. I did one job where the person had been recruited into the police by an organised crime group, and their sole purpose was to get into the intelligence office, so that they were then paid by them and paid by the police as a salary, and the police obviously didn't know, and they'd taken 2.5 years to get into that.
They joined up
with the sole purpose of becoming an informant for that crime group.
The lads in the military have done it, haven't they? They've joined up to work for someone else,
line of duty style or departed style.
So I've deployed against that. He was in the intelligence office, and his partner, I think it's his girlfriend, not his wife, but she was running like coke parties and dealing a lot of coke, and so I've worked against people like that. I've worked against corrupt police in Gibraltar that were involved or allegedly involved in importation of drugs, and again, that's a tough old place to. I just thought of a story. I don't know. Do you want me to tell you this? So, Royal Gibraltar Police. I deployed from the UK. They've got a law out there where even doing that work, you've got to join the Royal Gibraltar Police in order to work in their jurisdiction, which is pretty much unheard of, but it's just a rule they've got. In order to do that, you have to be sworn in by the Chief of Police, the Commissioner of Police, and a magistrate, local magistrate. So my handler, I'm staying in Gibraltar, he's staying in La Linea, just across the border. He arranges for him, the Chief of Police and the magistrate to come to my hotel room, where it's all going to happen in this hotel room. I'm going to be sworn in, and then I'll get a blank warrant card, which they'll hand to me, which is part of the ceremony, and then take it back, and it stays in a locked drawer all the time that I'm working there. That morning that they're coming over, I've got up, like I say, like coming over at 10. I thought, right, shower, shave, get myself squared away. I go in, use the loo. When I've finished, I pull the handle comes off in the toilet. I'm just in my room, right? So I'm like, okay, no, that's no drama. I'll just ring down, get maintenance up here, get it squared away. So I ring them, tell them to come up. They're like, yeah, no problem, we'll send someone up. I said, if you could, please, because I got a meeting up here in about an hour. Like, yeah, no problem at all. So I get myself sorted in my clobber to have the meeting. No one's arrived. So I've now got about 20 minutes, and it's kicking up a little bit in this room. So I'm thinking, right, this is not ideal, this, because so I ring back down, and they're like, has no one been up yet? No one's been up, and I need this fixing now, because I don't want it happening while there's people here. And I want to like open some window and get it sorted. Really sorry, yeah, we'll send someone. So I'm now like clock watching. Gets to about 5 minutes until this thing's happening. Still no one's arrived. And I get this knock on the door. And he's opened the door. He's like a little Spanish looking guy there. He's like in a blue shirt and trousers. I'm like, mate, get in here. So open the door, and right next to the front door is the bathroom door. So I open it, lift the lid so he can see what the problem is, show him the handle. And he's like looking like that. And he goes a big garbled like conversation. And the one word that I picked out was magistrate. I'm like, oh no, this is the magistrate.
No.
Not the maintenance. So I've shut the lid. I'm like, not that, sorry about that. Come back in here. I've walked him back into the room, put him over the other side, and I'm like, tea, coffee. And he's like still looking like, he looks completely, he's completely like, I've just taken him in, showed him Richard, and then sent him off. I'm like, oh man, what have I done?
That's brilliant, mate.
And then there was another knock at the door, and it's a big guy, he was the commissioner of the police, and stood behind him is my cover officer who's out there with me, and he shakes me hand, walks in, and the guy behind him goes, hello mate. He went, I was like, mate, don't even get me started, and I'll tell you later. and then they both come in, another knock at the door. It's like Noel's house party. Another knock at the door, open it, and there's a guy in the fault. Yeah, and I was like, not now, slam. And I was like, that was it, done. But that was a shocker. And that story, that went around for a little while.
Oh, funny, mate.
Yeah, not great.
Oh, mate, I'm not sure there's hundreds of stories we could go into, but what was, did you get to reach a point where you're like, I'm done with this now? Or was it an end of career time? Like when you stepped out and into doing what you're doing now?
I got to 2016. I was due out in 2019. That would have been 30. And I thought, I've got to try and grow up a bit here now, because I'll do 30 years. I need to think about a pension and stuff now. I've got to try and do the grown-uppy part of life and think about future. So in 2016, I went for promotion. Initially, they were going to promote me within the unit, which would have meant I'd stayed on for obviously a bit longer. That wasn't the bosses changed and the landscape moved a little bit. So they said, no, it's not going to happen. So in 2016, I went to counter-terrorism. As on a higher rank, and then I had a team to look after there. I did that for 3 years, and then I got out on the day of the 30 years, and that was me. That was me done.
Then straight into work.
Yeah, so I went. In fact, on that last year, I was on holiday with family, and I got a WhatsApp message from a group I'm in, which is a mixture of like ex-mil blokes, current police, and just like-minded sort of people, you know. And it was a job advert, and the guy that put it on the group and just said, might interest someone, might not. Anyway, here it is, and it was a job in close protection in London, week on, week off, something I've never considered really. And then but I'd already secured doing a scheme called 30 plus, so I could, if I wanted, I could go back after my 30. I had to take a month off for like tax reasons and stuff. And then I kind of like looked at it, and I sat there thinking, I've been doing this since, I know I've done different jobs, but I've been working for the same organisation since I was 18. So maybe actually it's probably a good time to go out and go private, and go in the private sector. So I thought about that. I messaged the guy on the advert while I was out there, and he sort of said, he was ex-police, which I think was helped. And he sort of said, send us your CV. I haven't got a CV. I've never needed one. And he went, well, give us a rundown of where you've been and what you've done. So similar to this, but a much shorter version. I just put in the department titles of where I'd worked. And he said, come and see me when you get back. And that I resigned or retired on the 4th of December, and I started there on the 13th. And I'm still there, so I still work for the same firm.
I suppose to sum up, what now looking back there, sort of reflective, what do you think made your innate characteristics made you like good at that job? Because I can't imagine many people could do this, to have like the skill set.
What made me good at it?
Yeah, like you said, of your genetic, sort of obviously highly emotionally intelligent, flexible, moral compass, perhaps.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't know. It's very difficult. I don't think of it like that. But I like to like people, and you're meeting a lot of different people with a lot of different personalities.
Yeah, building relationships.
Yeah, and building relationships, and I think that I'm sure that helped me. Weirdly,
it probably helps you in what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, no, it does 100%. But weirdly, the sort of side of it, like with my growing up side of it, I I felt comfortable. Like it's probably come from, if I'm honest, it's probably a lot of it's come from my dad, because my dad was in the city. They both come. My mum and dad came from working class, and then he earned money. My dad's sort of default position.
Sorry.
Albeit he would work with people during the day that had a lot of money and were very successful. But his sort of default was he'd come back and go down the pub with his builders mates and all that, and he just liked people for what they were as opposed to everything around them. And I think
a good trait, mate.
Yeah, and I think I've just carried that on probably, and I've got that off him, and so it doesn't really matter where you sit in social society. I don't care about that. I just like people that I like, and that I'm sure that helped. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll come across on this, mate. Mate, it's been well, for one, thanks for sharing all that, because I know you haven't done anything like that before. It's been a fascinating conversation that I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy, and like we say to a few, a part 2 would probably be welcome as well. Delve a bit deeper into some of those.
100%, mate. Bill Kilman, thanks very much for
you're welcome.
I love that, mate. I'd say that's my favourite one.
Yeah.
Really?
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, cool.
Mate. No, yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers, mate.